Let's talk about the time a vampire changed the law. It's a story of moral panic, misinformation, and new media in the 1950s, and how in the 21st century media is still messing with the story 70 years later. And it starts in a necropolis, a city of the dead full of headstones and weeping angels. Exactly the sort of place where you could imagine hundreds of children hunting for a vampire. And in Glasgow, that's exactly what happened. In late 1954, heavily armed children stormed the necropolis looking for a 7-foot vampire with iron teeth. But there's just one problem. This is the wrong necropolis. When you search for the Gorbals vampire online, it's often attached to images of this cemetery. It's the famous one above Glasgow Cathedral. But the actual event happened across the river, at the southern necropolis in the Gorbals, which is partly how I ended up filming at the wrong necropolis. In September 1954, a rumour spread amongst the children of the Gorbals that something was in the cemetery. Not a ghost, not a strange man, but a vampire. A 7-foot vampire with iron teeth. According to the rumour, it had already killed and eaten 2 local boys. So the children did what children do when faced with a suspected vampire. They got tooled up, armed with sticks, stones and knives, and even with some bringing dogs, they headed to the southern necropolis to hunt it down. The police were called, and Constable Alex Deeprose was the first on scene, and his account is brilliant. He said, "When I appeared, I felt like the Pied Piper of Hamelin. All shapes and sizes of children streamed after me, all talking at once and telling me of the vampire with the iron teeth. This I could handle, but when the grown-ups approached me and asked earnestly, 'Is there anything in this vampire story?' it made me think." And that's a great detail, because it wasn't only the children getting carried away. Some of the adults weren't too sure either. More police arrived, but the hunt continued for several hours. Eventually, it ended in the most British way possible. A local headmaster called Edward Cusick arrived and basically told everyone to stop being so ridiculous. And then it started raining. A few die-hard would-be vampire slayers continued the hunts for the next few nights, but eventually the interest petered out. No vampire found, no monster in the cemetery, and according to police records, there were never any missing boys. It was all a rumour that had just gotten out of hand. Afterwards, the adults looked for something to blame, and they landed on horror comics, especially American horror comics. An unlikely coalition of teachers, communists, and evangelical Christians had already been trying to get them banned. And this hunt was a perfect patsy. The fact that Dark Mysteries issue 15 featured a vampire with iron teeth was also just another string in their bow. Though in reality, these comics were like gold dust. This was a poverty-stricken area and most of the children couldn't even afford comics. It's unlikely any of them would have ever seen this particular issue, and many of them didn't even really know what a vampire was. But even the news got involved with the panic. A Daily Record editorial said, "Do not laugh off Glasgow's vampire scare as a monstrous hoax. These comics must be banned." But in reality, they probably should have looked a little closer to home, because the children would have heard about Jenny with the iron teeth, a monstrous hag from a poem by the Scottish poet Alexander Anderson. It was said to roam the nearby Glasgow Green. She was a child-eating monster with iron teeth, and often used as a way to frighten children from going out at night. But that's how stories like this work. A poem becomes a warning becomes a playground rumour, and a playground rumour becomes a vampire hunt. And if the evangelicals had been looking for an iron-toothed monster, they could have just checked their Bibles, as one crops up in Daniel 7:7. Anderson's poem itself was probably more a commentary on the dangers of industrial working and its associated pollution and the effects it could have on the poorer edges of society. But the hunt fed into the moral panic around new media and led to a swift change in the law. Viscount Tenby, who could easily be mistaken for a vampire himself, introduced the Children and Young Persons Harmful Publications Act of 1955, which specifically banned magazines and comics of a repulsive and horrible nature from being sold directly to children. But this twist of new media is what brings me back here, because the internet, YouTube, podcasts and blogs have all started attaching it to the wrong necropolis. And I can see why. This place looks perfect for it. Gothic monuments, stone angels, and a skyline full of shadow. If someone says Glasgow necropolis vampire, this is probably the place people unfamiliar with the city will imagine. But the real story belongs somewhere else. The southern necropolis. The Gorbals. The other side of the river. But when stories get retold, they can lose details, and online retellings of online retellings can just compound the matter even further. That's why when I did a quick search for stories about Glasgow while I was wandering around the city with an hour to spare, I ended up here. It's only when I started checking the details properly and wondered why people were labelling this as the southern necropolis when it's quite clearly in the northern part of the city that I realised they'd mislabelled it. And there are, in fact, two necropolises. Necropolises? Necropoli? Whatever the plural, I had filmed at the wrong one. Ultimately, the Glaswegian Vampire was never found in either necropolis, probably because it never existed in the first place. But the story did exist, and it changed the lore. And that's probably more interesting, because it tells us about childhood fears and how the eerie fires of local metalworks and the pollution they created across the only green space the children had to play turns the metaphorical iron teeth of local industry into a tangible horror. It also tells us about old monsters in modern cities and how adults can be quick to blame the wrong thing, and how easily folklore can wander so far it ends up haunting the wrong cemetery. Stories do have a habit of wandering, and this one's wandered all the way to the other side of the city.